What's up, everyone? Welcome into DodgerHeads, presented by DodgerBlue.com, your home for the 2020 World Series champion Los Angeles Dodgers. My name is Jeff Spiegel, joined by Daniel Starkand. Daniel, after a 3-4 week where they struggle against the Giants, it feels nice to remind myself that we are the defending World Series champs.
Yeah, and I will say they ended the week well, at least with a couple wins over the Rockies there. But yeah, for a while there in the middle of the week, those 3 games or whatever it was, that definitely was not fun. We had our live show the other night after the explosion against the Giants. A lot of angry people. Us ourselves were very angry. So it's nice to kind of get over that hump. We know how streaky this team is.
Yeah.
I feel like all year it's either been super high or super low with this team. There's no in between. But yeah, hopefully, I mean, we got a big week coming up this week, so hopefully they could kind of ride the momentum from Saturday and Sunday going into the series with the Giants tomorrow.
Yeah, and you're going to need to clarify which explosion against the Giants you were referring to, Daniel. We were referring to the second of 2 explosions against the Giants. So here's a plan for today. We're going to do a little week in review stuff, talk about the week that we just saw, the big series against the Giants as well as against the Rockies. We'll do stock up and stock down. We'll talk some quotes about booing Kenley Jansen, whether or not Kenley Jansen is the closer moving forward, why the Dodgers are so bad in extra innings, Josiah Gray's role, et cetera, et cetera. We'll do some injury updates, Corey Knebel, Corey Seager, Mookie Betts. We'll do, and then we're going to get into a segment I'm excited about, our top 3 trade targets. So we're less than a week away from the trade deadline. Daniel and I did some prep work last week talking about a bunch of guys. So this time I asked Daniel, pick the 3 trades that you would like to make if you were Andrew Friedman. So we'll talk through each of ours there, and then we'll end with a preview of this week's series against the Giants. Huge series, off day today, 3 games starting tomorrow against the Giants, 2 games back in the division. So a lot to talk about today. Well, let's just dive right in. As we stand today, believe it or not, the Dodgers are just 2 games back of the San Francisco Giants. It feels like 7. They are 3.5 games up on the Padres still, so who are 5.5 back of the Giants. The Dodgers have the 2nd best record in the National League. They have the 4th best record in baseball. Yes, they were 3-4 this past week, but they do get the Giants and then the Diamondbacks. Always nice to see the Diamondbacks on your schedule. So This past week, they lose the opener to the Giants. They come back on a Will Smith walk-off in Game 2 to beat the Giants. Kenley Jansen blows back-to-back saves. And then they come against the Rockies. You're thinking, we need a rebound. They lose the opener to the Rockies. They strike out 3 consecutive times with the bases loaded in a tie game in the bottom of the 9th. They lose in the 10th. Thankfully, they come back. They rebound. Pitching all the story in the last 2. They win Saturday and Sunday to sort of salvage the week. And so let me ask you this question, big picture, Daniel. Was there a point at this week when you started to wonder whether or not this season was going to work out for the Dodgers? Because if I'm being honest, there was a moment Friday night after that second Kenley Jansen blown save. I sort of took a day off on Friday and didn't pay much attention to that game against the Rockies. I read the story afterwards saying we struck out 3 times with the bases loaded in a tie game in the bottom of the 9th. And there was a moment there where I'm starting to think to myself, is it really going to happen? Like, are we really going to lose the division to the Giants? Has that thought crossed your mind at all this past week?
I will say I wish I would have taken your strategy because I watched that game Friday night. So I sat through another 3 in a row of just absolutely just the worst baseball you could possibly imagine. With that being said, though, no, like that's thought still hasn't crossed my mind. Like even with all the injuries, even with how bad they've played, recently, I still see the division as, easily obtainable. Yeah. You mentioned they're only 2 games out. Like that could change in a couple days here. I mean, we got 3 games with the Giants this week. There's still so much baseball to be played. There's a trade deadline. We're both expecting the Dodgers to make some sort of move. We're not exactly sure what. They could go a number of different ways, but we're expecting reinforcements on the way. Guys that are injured, which there's a lot of them. Yeah. Mookie was just placed on the IL now too. But there's no one that's like outside of Dustin May earlier. Everyone is still expected to be back at some point. So you still, when you're looking way ahead, all the goals are still there for the Dodgers. Hasn't been the funnest season. I will say that it's been a lot of ups and downs. But I still have maintained confidence throughout. So I guess I'll pat myself on the back a little for that one because I know how easy it is to start panicking, especially with all the craziness we saw this week. But I'm still choosing to remain confident.
And for me, it's less about like pessimism about the Dodgers as much as like at some point I have to stop assuming that the Giants are just going to come back to earth. And, the sample size is growing and growing and growing. And So that's it more for me. It's not like, oh, the Dodgers are terrible, they suck. It's more so I'm just worried about that one game wild card playoff and the Dodgers possibly having to be in there. Obviously, you win 2 against the Rockies. Momentum shifts in the other direction. We got a 3-game set against the Giants right here. It could be a whole new narrative, right? We could be sitting here in 3 days,
Right.
4 days, I should say. We could either be a game up in the division or 5 back in the division and anything in between. And so I don't
Yeah.
think either of us would be surprised by either of those outcomes, right? Like, I mean, obviously we'd be mildly surprised, I think, by a sweep either way, but it wouldn't be like getting swept by the Diamondbacks. You'd say, I mean, I guess I get it. Like the Dodgers are injured and
Yeah.
blah, blah, blah. You could talk yourself into any of them. So lots to talk about, lots to say. Let's just dive back in to this past week. Stock up and stock down. This is a segment that we do regularly, although we've kind of taken a break the last couple of weeks. We were due this past week. So stock up and stock down. I know you've got sort of the biggest headliner here in stock up, so I'll let you start there. Who's your first stock up for this past week?
Yeah. My first stock up has been the guy at the top of the lineup getting the job done basically every day, and that's Chris Taylor. We just mentioned the Mookie injury. He was red hot before he went down too. So it sucks losing him, during this critical stretch. But when you have a guy like Chris Taylor who could just replace him in the leadoff spot and is going to hit 5 homers in the last 7 games, that it doesn't get any better than that. Chris Taylor, obviously he was an all-star, so we've been on the Chris Taylor train all year, but over the last 2 weeks specifically, he's been one of the hottest hitters in the league. His OPS over his last 7 games is like 1,600, just absolutely ridiculous. So shout out to him, because with all the injuries the Dodgers have had, it feels like he's been the guy filling in for just about everyone. Like, he's been at second base, he's been at shortstop, he's been in center field, left field, wherever you need him, he's there, and he's mashing. So huge shout out to Chris Taylor. He's been carrying this team now for a while, it feels like.
Quick aside on Taylor. This is something I had later in the show, but I'll ask it now. I mean, he's been so good in the leadoff spot. What happens when Mookie comes back? Chris Taylor, for what it's worth, doesn't seem to care where he hits. But have you changed your mind? You and I had a lot of conversations a year ago, and you're big on where guys sit in the lineup and that kind of thing. So is Chris Taylor sort of making a claim for the leadoff spot, or does that Mookie's once he returns?
I think he's definitely making a claim, but me personally, I'd stick with Mookie up there. We've seen kind of the differences with Mookie, like where he specifically bats in the lineup. I think he's been at his best when he's in the leadoff spot. Like you mentioned with Taylor, he's kind of been good everywhere. So you kind of have that luxury of, you don't really have to worry about where you're putting him. He's still gonna give you the same quality at bats. So I think there's value in having him maybe batting 5th or 6th or whatever. Like, you're still getting that same production just further down in the lineup. And then with Mookie, you're getting, the ultimate table setter at the top. So I'd keep Mookie there, but I definitely think he's made a case. I mean, if you look at what he's done since going to that leadoff spot, I mean, he's been incredible. So, he's definitely making a tougher decision than I ever would have thought it would be. Because like you said, a year ago, I was all over the Mookie has to bat leadoff under every circumstance. I guess I'm softening a little on that, and if Chris Taylor keeps hitting bombs, I may have to rethink this.
Yeah. Well, for me, stock up, my first one, I'm going to go starting pitching, which I think was kind of the other headline of this past week. I'll start with Walker Buehler and Julio Urias. Those two combined for 14 and a third innings, 2 earned runs, allowing just 10 base runners, striking out 14 in a week in which the bullpen seemed to be imploding all over the place, knowing that you've got bullpen games still sort of potentially with Gonsolin, Gray, and Price. For those two guys to go out and give 7+ innings in both of their starts, absolutely amazing. I mean, we talked Buehler, you probably could have gotten more out of if you wanted to. Obviously, they pull him after 7 and a third, but great stuff from them. And also David Price, a shout out to him. 74 pitches as he's getting built up, but he gets through 5 2/3, allows just 5 base runners. Yes, the 3 earned runs isn't ideal. I believe Bickford allowed one of those on a couple base hits that he allowed, but not in the same category as Buehler and Urias, but Price was really good. Gonsolin had his best start of the season in his last outing. And so just in a stretch where the bullpen is taxed, and even when it's healthy, seems to be in a little bit of state of flux, for those guys to go out and eat innings, keep the score low, and keep the team in it when the offense isn't going to produce and the bullpen is sketchy. Big stuff from the bullpen, or from the starters. So stock up for the starting rotation for me.
Yeah. I mean, you said it all. Those guys have all been great. Yeah, Price kind of got screwed a little bit with the 3 earned runs there. He pitched a lot better than that line score would show. And it was good just seeing him specifically, like, getting deep into a game. He's He's a guy who they were hesitant to build up. Then they kind of reached the point where they had no
Yeah.
choice, and now it took like 2-3 starts, and he's pretty much built up now. So that's great to see. My next stock up is just the catchers in the Dodgers organization as a whole. I would say. Obviously we saw what Will Smith did this week. He had a walk-off home run. He hits another game-winning home run yesterday. He's been great all year. He should have been an all-star. We've spoke at length about that. So stock up for Will Smith. Also Austin Barnes, our guy Austin Barnes. He's coming off probably his best week of the year. He batted .550 over the last week. He hits the home run Saturday, which the Dodgers win 1-0. So he supplied all the offense. The night before he had a pinch hit single and winds up scoring the tying run in the 9th inning. He's batting over 400 as a pinch hitter this year. So I know we've talked about bringing up the next guy I'm going to mention, Keibert Ruiz, to have an extra bat off the bench. Well, Austin Barnes has kind of been that guy. I mean, he's batting over 400 as a pinch hitter. So he's kind of created a little value for himself there, I guess. I'm not going to go over the top with it, but hey, that's not bad by any means. And then the third catcher is the guy I just mentioned, Keibert Ruiz. I mean, I don't think there's a hotter hitter on the planet, like regardless of what level you're at, than him.
Yeah.
I mean, he had a game where he hit 3 home runs and a double off the top of the wall. So he's got an OPS over 1,000. I don't know how you could keep him down much longer. Obviously, we got the trade deadline coming up this week, so we'll see if he survives that. I think we're both under the impression that the Dodgers want to keep him. Justin Lorber, our guy, future Dodgers, has said the same thing. And honestly, how could you not at this point, the way he's mashing? So I'd say after the trade deadline, once things kind of get sorted out, he might be someone that they look to call up. And also, if we want to add a fourth catcher, Diego Cartaya, we talked about it the other night. Keith Law just released his mid-season top 50 or 100 prospects. I don't remember what it was, but he was the highest Dodger on the list. I think he was like 22nd or something. I mean, my light just went out here, so sorry I'm in the dark now. I forgot to charge it, I guess. But Dodgers catchers throughout the organization are all just playing great baseball right now.
Yeah, Cartaya was ranked one spot ahead of Jack Leiter on that top 50. So basically they're saying Cartaya was slightly better than arguably the best prospect to come out of the draft that just took place. So fascinating stuff there. I know the Barnes game was hilarious because I almost sent out a tweet and this is a moment I've had, when the lineup is as depleted as it is, when we're starting Rex and Rayleigh and McKinney and Beatty and McKinstry and all these dudes, can't we just play Will Smith every day for that stretch of time? And then, of course, I don't fire the tweet off, thankfully, because Austin Barnes goes on and hits the home run, and they win 1-0. So there you go. Stock up for me, I'm going to shout out a couple relievers. Blake Trinan, the obvious one here. I mean, his stuff, no earned runs since June 23rd. So we're over a month with no earned runs against Blake Trinan. 12 straight scoreless appearances, 12 and a third innings. 8 of those 12 appearances, he has not allowed a base runner. So Trinan is pitching as well as he has in his entire stretch as a Dodger. The next guy, though, I think deserves equal praise, Alex Vesia. Since July 9th, when he got recalled to the Dodgers, we know about the stretch. He had struck out 15 straight batters or something down in the minors. Yeah. Since coming up, 8 innings pitched, no earned runs, 8 strikeouts, 1 hit, and 1 walk. In 8 innings pitched, he has allowed 1 hit and 1 walk from the left side, has been really, really good. I believe in his last outing, he gave the Dodgers maybe 2 innings. I can't remember if it was a full 2 innings or an inning and 2/3 or something, but really, really good stuff. So stock up for Trinan and Vesia for me. Last one for you. I think you've got a stock down. Who do you have for your last one?
I do have a stock down, and it's a combo stock down. I'll say it's the combo of Kenley Jansen and Dave Roberts. I think both guys kind of, shoulder some of the blame for those couple losses to the Giants. I don't need to go into a whole lot of detail about why they're on my stock down. I think everyone who watched the games knows why. I will say good for Kenley for bouncing back on, I think it was Saturday night. He closed out that game. But I will say he still did walk a guy with 2 outs in that game. And I'd say the walks as a whole have been kind of a problem with him this year. I mean, he's already surpassed his career high in walks, and we're not even at the trade deadline. We still got almost a half a season to go here. So, I hope he could improve on that if he wants to remain in his closer role, because the way he can't hold runners on base. So, every walk is pretty much a double, and then you're just a bloop away from a run scoring
Yep.
and tying the game in some circumstances. So, he definitely needs to clean that up. And Dave Roberts probably needs to use him less,
Yeah.
I guess. So yeah, that's my stock.
Yeah,
down.
and the cutter is the thing to watch. I mean, we haven't had one of those games, and it feels like forever, where he is throwing the cutter and guys are just swinging and missing and can't figure out why they didn't hit it. We just haven't seen that. The velocity was up on the 4 and the 2-seamer in Saturday's appearance, which was nice to see, but it just still didn't feel dominant. Like it was a fairly easy, stress-free inning, thankfully. Yeah, I was just surprised by that. So I'll go one more stock up here. Not a player, but this is stock up to Albert Pujols' hugs. Lots of publicity for Albert Pujols' hugs this past week. Chris Taylor's quote was great. Albert probably cheers for his teammates more than anybody. It seems like he's genuinely happy for everyone. He's more happy for you than you are for yourself. I loved that quote, because Chris Taylor never smiles. So to say that somebody else is more excited for Chris Taylor than Chris Taylor is feels like a really low bar. Feels like a low bar to clear. But lots of publicity, lots of stories about Albert Pujols' hugs. So stock up to Albert Pujols' hugs there. But good week when Albert Pujols is giving hugs. That means good things are happening. Chris Taylor hitting home runs is good stuff there.
Yep.
Picking up on a couple of the storylines we just tucked on, let's shift into the week in quotes. This is a segment where we go through a lot of the post-game press conferences and just, hey, what's going on here? What do you make of this? And we'll start with maybe the most popular social media conversation, which was the booing of Kenley Jansen. Now, I'll say up front, I think booing Kenley Jansen as he's coming into a game, as I think Eric Steven from True Blue LA pointed out so eloquently, it's stupid. Like, if there's no benefit to booing a guy on his way into the stadium. We can debate here in a second about whether you should be booing Kenley Jansen on his way out of the stadium, but definitely not in. This is what Dave Roberts said about booing in general. Quote, "This guy's a lifelong Dodger. The fans certainly have a right to voice their frustrations. I get that. But I do believe this guy, born and raised as a Dodger, what he does, he cares about the Dodgers and the fan base, and he's shown that on the field and off the field. No one hurts more than he does, to be quite honest. He's worked really hard to get back, should have been an all-star this year, and he's had a fantastic season. There was a hiccup the other night to have one at home. He was looking forward to pitching at home. I'm disappointed to hear that, certainly. He's not going to say it, but I am." This was actually after his first of back-to-back blown saves, I believe. But what do you make of this quote? What do you make of Kenley Jansen getting booed as he's walking off the field? What do you make of all this?
Yeah, well, let me just start by saying I'm in agreement that booing him while going onto the field makes zero sense. Like, why you just want to mess with his head before he pitches? Like, at the end of the day, we all want him. Like, even if you don't like Kenley Jansen, you still want him to pitch well because that means the Dodgers are going to be successful. So, yeah, I'm out on booing him going in. I'll also say, me personally, I would never boo him going out, even after some of the outings we saw. That's just not my thing, really. I will say I understand why it happened. Like, it's not like this is like a one-off incident with Kenley Jansen. Like, we've been, I don't want to say dealing with this, but like this has been a thing for years now. Like, he hasn't exactly been lights out. There's been a ton of ups and downs, and I feel like a lot of the downs have come in the biggest moments, whether it be in the playoffs and World Series, or in this case, like a big series against the Giants when you're trying to take over first place. I think a lot of the booing was because of that. Like, if that happened against like the Rockies or the Diamondbacks, like, I don't think you get that magnitude of booing. But I just think the fans there understood the significance of this series with the Giants. Obviously, all Dodger fans hate the Giants and want to win those games extra to begin with. So I think just the circumstances led to some extra frustration there. But I'll say I would never boo. I don't think that makes sense. Like, kind of like David Roberts said, like, this is a guy who's put his hard work, his sweat and tears into the Dodgers organization for his entire career. And like, it's not like he's going out on the mound with the intention of failing. Like, he wants to succeed more than anyone. So I'm out on booing. I understand why it's happened. But yeah, I think, positivity helps, I think. And I think booing a guy like that could kind of mess with his psyche, and that's not going to lead to the results that anyone wants.
Yeah, and I think you pointed out, like, let's remember, Jansen is not intentionally trying to sabotage these games. And so with that in mind, like, obviously he's as pissed off or as bummed as you are, probably more so because he's the guy who has to wear it. He's the guy who it's affecting his livelihood, so to speak. The other thing is, what does booing accomplish? Like, if you are the person screaming boos or expletives at Kenley Jansen, like, okay, cool. Like maybe that makes you feel better for like 30 seconds. And then you have to go home and
Yeah.
live with the fact that that's how you make yourself feel better. But on the other side, like it doesn't accomplish anything positive. And I'm not saying like you should
Yeah.
give him a standing ovation after he blows a save, but
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
why would you pour gasoline on the fire at somebody else's house, right? Like it's like his house is on fire, and by booing, you're just dumping gasoline on it. You're like cutting hoses in half to make sure they can't be used. It's like there's no logic to it. I get it's an emotional thing. I get fan stands for fanatic, and so there's a lack of rationality and logic sometimes with this type of stuff. But I just don't get it. I mean, if you want to boo the other team, knock yourself out. But to boo your own guy whose goals and aspirations are the exact same as yours, it just seems really foolish to me. It seems really selfish in a lot of ways. Like it might make you feel better temporarily, but it won't in the long run. So I don't mean to get super philosophical about it, but again,
Yeah.
it makes no sense to boo the guy, definitely when he's coming in. I understand the frustration. If you watched our live postgame show on Thursday night after he blew the second one, I mean, we were both ticked. We were both pissed and disappointed, but to then go out and boo a guy as he's coming off the field at his own stadium for a guy, like he said, that has put in the blood, sweat, and tears for the Dodger organization. You know, like when Joe Kelly was first here and was terrible, like I if you wanted to boo Joe Kelly, I'd say mostly the same things, but I'd also be like, yeah, like he's done bad things to the Dodgers when he was on the Cardinals. He beat us in the World Series. Like it made more sense. Kenley Jansen has been fantastic for the Dodgers for the majority of his career. He's provided unbelievable value. And so I don't know. The booing thing, just it's weird. I get it emotionally, but logically, rationally, like, and even just as a human being, like it kind of hard for me to wrap my head around. So
Yeah. And let me just close this topic by saying, like, even if you don't like Kenley Jansen or you don't think he should be the closer, like whatever the case may be, the Dodgers are still like going to need
yeah,
him to
yeah,
win a World
100%.
Series this year. Like there's going to be some big inning in the playoffs, whether it's the 7th inning, the 8th inning, the 9th inning, whatever. Like guys, bullpens get taxed, guys pitch 2 days in a row, so they're not available. So there's going to be some times when the Dodgers are going to have to go to Kenley Jansen, like whether anyone likes it or not. It's going to happen. So I think, like, even if you don't like the guy, we still need him in the best position to succeed, you know,
Yeah.
because obviously everyone wants the Dodgers to win the World Series.
Yeah, and right along those lines, the second follow-up quote here was on Kenley Jansen's role. Dave Roberts was asked Wednesday night after a blown save, are you thinking about his role? Quote, not thinking about his role. I'm not going to rethink his role. The next night, Kenley Jansen blows a save again. Same question. Quote, I'm not reconsidering his role. He went on to say Blake Treinen, you know, who's gonna fill in if Blake Treinen becomes the closer, then who becomes like the setup fireman role, et cetera, et cetera. What do you make of that? I mean, I don't think either of us are surprised. Neither of us were expecting him to lose his job as closer. Obviously, he comes back Saturday, gets the save. But what do you make of the fact that Dave Roberts, even after back-to-back blown saves in the biggest games of the season, not thinking about his role, not rethinking the role, not reconsidering the role?
Yeah, I mean, like you said, I'm not surprised at all. That's exactly what I was expecting from Dave Roberts. I will say though, like even if you're gonna have, you know, Kenley as the primary closer, that's fine. But let's mix it up a little bit, or like kind of like they did over the weekend. Like for a majority of the year, the topic of conversation around Kenley was he's great, but when he pitches on back-to-back days, he's nowhere near as great on the second day. So, and then he kind of started doing better, so they got away from that. But there was a large chunk of the season where Kenley was not pitching on back-to-back days, and he was seeing really good results because of that. So maybe let's get back to that for a little bit here. Like we saw, you know, he was down Friday night, and the bullpen couldn't exactly hold on to a lead, but also they had a chance to win that game with bases loaded and no outs and couldn't score. But and then Kenley comes back Saturday and gets the save, and then another save situation Sunday. They go to Joe Kelly and he gets the save. Like let's kind of ease up on Kenley a little here. He doesn't need a pitch every other or twice in a row or 3 times in 4 days.
Yeah.
Like let's go back to pitching him every other day or whatever. Let's give him the rest needed to stay fresh. And I think you're going to see better results, you know, because of that.
Yeah, I think when I recorded a short video last week, and I want to say he had only pitched back-to-back 7 or 8 times this season. Obviously, Wednesday and Thursday, I've said this 100 times, so I apologize. I mean, he threw 60 pitches in 2 days, which is 20 more than any other back-to-back all season. He pitched the most pitches of any game all year on Wednesday, and then came back and broke that mark on Thursday. And so not only was it back-to-back, but it was back-to-back after his most like stressful outing, blown save, etc. So we don't need to rehash. We understand that. One more thought on this. Dave Roberts had a quote that was sort of making the rounds about how Blake Treinen was kind of the fireman. They like him in that role, and that's why they don't want him to be the closer. I just want to push back and say that's not how Dave Roberts has been using Blake Treinen. His last 8 appearances have been in the 8th inning or the 9th inning. 12 of his last 13 appearances have ended either in the 8th or the 9th. That's not a fireman. That's a setup man. So, like, it sounds good to say, hey, we like having Treinen to be able to throw him in whenever we need him. Until Treinen starts pitching in the 6th inning sometimes and the 7th inning sometimes, like, if he's the 8th inning guy every time for a month, that's not a fireman role, right? Am I missing something? Like, Blake Treinen is not being used as this sort of Swiss Army knife, like we just throw him in the biggest moments. That's just simply not how they're using him.
Yeah, and I think that's how they did use him in the postseason last year. Like there were some games where he came in the 4th, 5th inning, the 6th, 7th, whatever it is. And I definitely agree. Like that's definitely a valuable role. Like big spot here, 2 guys on, middle of the order coming up. Like that's when you want to go to your best guy instead of maybe saving him for the 9th inning. But like you said, Treinen hasn't really been used in that role. And I will also say, like he hasn't had as long as of a leash as Kenley. You just mentioned how over 2 outings, Kenley threw 60 pitches. You might have to go back through Treinen's last 7 outings for his last 60 pitches. Like that guy, he's so good that he gets 3 outs in 7, 8, 9 pitches, and then he's just done for the night. Whereas Kenley gets a leash of 28 to 33 pitches to get those same 3 outs. But it's not like it's not, they're both getting 3 outs, but one guy is being stressed a lot more. So I don't see why, like if Treinen gets 3 outs on 8 pitches, why not send him back out there and let him get to 20, 25 pitches for that outing, like if it's a close game or whatever,
Totally. And both guys historically have shown that they can stretch, Jansen and Treinen. Treinen probably more so. We saw a lot of that. It feels like the fireman has become Bickford, actually. Like he feels like he's the guy who comes in with 2 guys on and 1 out, 2 outs kind of thing. I think Dave Roberts referred to him as their righty killer. So maybe that's why he's been pitching sort of in that end of an inning type of scenarios, just because they like him against righties and not so much against lefties. I don't know. But a couple more quotes here, and then we'll get on to some trade stuff. Justin Turner on extra innings. What the deal is, why the Dodgers are 1-10 this year. Quote, I have no idea. If you guys have anything, let me know. It's pretty weird. I think 1-10 this year in extra innings, that's obviously not good. End of quote. We talked about this. I mean, they did it again. Like, what is it? Is it a depth of bullpen issue? Because when they blow it against some teams, it feels like it's not like the teams they're playing against have remarkably better bullpens. Is it a style of play? Like, where do you come down on why this is? Or is it just 100% fluky?
I think it's kind of all the above. Like there's definitely a little fluke to it, but there's also like the Dodgers just need to execute better in a lot of those situations, and they just haven't. Like we talk about how their pitchers can't hold runners on.
Yeah.
Well, when an inning is starting with a runner on second base, like that becomes even more of an issue. And we've talked about offensively, the Dodgers not being able to bunt guys over or move guys over or get the sac fly when they need it. And in extra innings, when you need 1 or 2 runs like that becomes, more apparent.
Yeah.
Like the Dodgers had bases loaded and no outs in a tie game. You only need 1 of those runs to come in to win the game, and 3 guys in a row strike out.
Yeah.
That's just not executing right there. So I think it's a combination of different things. I definitely think some of it is fluky. Like if you go back and play those 11 games like 100 different times, this might be the only outcome that gets a team as good as the Dodgers to 1-10 in that span. So it's unfortunate, but it is what it is, and they're probably going to have more extra inning games moving forward. So I don't know if they need to get to the root of the problem or whatever, but it's definitely something they need to try and figure out. Like Justin Turner is wondering why. Well, that's not a good thing. Like we need to figure out why, and we need to fix it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean 1-10, like odds are that that's unlucky to some degree. So that's probably where I'd put most of my stock. Last one here, Josiah Gray makes his major league debut, 2 outings, 1 officially a start. 8 innings pitched, 7 hits, 6 earned runs, 5 walks, 13 strikeouts. Kind of a mixed bag. Asked an interesting question. What have you been able to show the Dodgers as they look for pitching at the trade deadline? Here was his answer. Quote, I think I've shown them I'm able to fill up the strike zone more times than not. Obviously have to eliminate the long ball. That's something I'm going to have to continue to work on. Continue to command my pitches and just continue to finalize and perfect the movement. I think I've shown flashes of having good stuff out there. obviously have to improve every day. So whatever role I'm in, I'm just going to go out there and improve. Every day that I have before starts, just continue to prepare, continue to feel good, continue to just get my body and pitches where I need to in preparation for each start I'm going to make. I'll ask you the question this way as we transition in a moment into a trade conversation. You've seen 8 innings out of Josiah Gray. Have you seen anything from him that changes your perspective on how much starting pitching help the Dodgers need to go out and get?
I definitely think a little bit. I mean, you got to like the stuff when watching him. The 13 strikeouts in 8 innings or whatever,
Yeah.
that's impressive. He had, in his outing the other day, he had 19 whiffs, which is the 4th most for a Dodger starter this year. And the 3 starts ahead of him were all Clayton Kershaw starts. So he had more whiffs in that start than
In
any
4
start
innings.
Walker Buehler has had this year, any start Julio's had this year, any start Trevor Bauer's had this year. He had more whiffs than all those guys. And like you just said, it was only in 4 innings. So you have to be impressed by that. But I will say, it's all about the command with him. We know this stuff is great, but 5 walks in 8 innings, that's not great. A couple of the home runs he gave up were on kind of pitches down the middle or pitches he didn't locate where he wanted them to. So if he could just kind of clean that stuff up, which he's young, so it's expected. Also, he's been coming back from injury, so it's not like he's been pitching a whole season at AAA. And also he didn't have a season last year, so he's still kind of getting back into the swing of things, I would say. Like, I expect him to get better as things go along. But yeah, I definitely think you got to be a little bit impressed. We've talked about how starting pitching is the biggest need. Well, with the emergence of Josiah Gray and how the bullpen's been throwing, recently, I think maybe we need to reconsider that at least a little bit. I still think overall, if you could add a top of the line starter, and we're about to get into this conversation too, then you still don't pass up that opportunity. But yeah, he's definitely helped, considering you're taking away bullpen games to get at least 4 innings out of him.
I mean, and I'll rephrase it this way. If I told you Josiah Gray's your number 5 starter for the rest of the year, with presumably Tony Gonsolin, David Price somewhere in the mix for the 4th and 5th role, like if those 3 guys are making up the 4th and 5th spot in your rotation for the rest of the year, do you feel okay about that?
Yeah, I definitely feel okay about that. But the thing is, you can't really assume health.
Yeah.
Like if he or one of those guys goes down and Clayton Kershaw is not back for a little while now, then what?
Yeah.
Like, I think you still need to get someone just to address that factor. But yeah, if you could tell me that those guys are going to stay healthy for the rest of the year, I'm definitely comfortable. And we've seen it over the last couple weeks. Starting pitching has not been the problem. Like that, all the games they lost, the starters were great, and it's been the bullpen that's blown it, and the offense hasn't been able to like add on to leads. So yeah, I definitely feel like comfortable with those guys, but the question is, can they stay healthy?
Yeah, and the thing to remember about Gray is obviously he's going to make adjustments, but the more he is up, the more other teams are going to be able to know his stuff. And, and obviously with the minor leagues the way they are, a lot of that information comes with a guy up to the major leagues, but with no season last year and how young he's been, at some point, teams are going to react against what he is doing and what he's doing well, whether or not he can react. So as good as he is now, and again, it hasn't been great. It's like a 6.75 ERA, albeit in a small sample size.
Yeah.
But to just assume that what you're seeing now is going to look the exact same for the next few months seems unrealistic. So a couple odds and ends here, and then we will get to the trade stuff. I promise I'm not dangling along. Some injury updates. Corey Knebel on the right track. On July 22nd, he was asked, and he guessed about 15 to 20 days would be away for him. And so that was 4 days ago. So you figure maybe 10 to 14 days left on that time frame. Corey Seager headed to Arizona for some simulated games today, I believe. It's possible that he would need a rehab assignment after that, so we could be looking at another week, maybe even a week and a half for Corey Seager not being with the Dodgers. Mookie Betts, the last one, added to the injured list on Sunday. Right hip inflammation, retroactive to Thursday. He's not eligible to return until Sunday. It does sound like they're hopeful that he'll be able to be activated immediately after that, but all of that remains to be seen. One other thing worth noting, some draft pick signing updates, some good news for the Dodgers. The Dodgers' first rounder, their third rounder, their fourth rounder, and their fifth rounder all signed. Of course, they had no second rounder. Only 2 of their top 10 picks are unsigned. That would be their 6th rounder and their 8th rounder. So 7th rounder, 9th rounder, and 10th rounder all signed. Also their 12th, 15th, and 18th rounders. They currently have about $200,000 in bonus pool money to play with over and above slot value for those guys that are unsigned, as well as some JC or high school guys in the 11th through the 20th. So Justin Lorber and I are going to be doing a show on Thursday of this week. I'm not sure when that's going to post, but I'm sure we'll talk more about that. So let's get to the trades. Again, we are in trade deadline week. We are talking about the Dodgers, so there's lots to talk about here. The exercise that I asked Daniel to participate in is each of us would pick our top 3 trade targets or trade packages kind of a deal. There's lots of names being mentioned. Daniel and I, just before coming on here, recorded a quick video on Jose Barrios from the Twins. John Morosi has connected both the Dodgers and the Padres to him as teams that are progressing in talks, so that's an option. Right before we got on, Trey Turner's name was mentioned by Peter Gammons as a guy who might be available. We might talk about him a little bit. Jim Bowden's got a crazy Max Scherzer proposal on the Athletic. So things are, the trade deadline season is at its peak right now. So I'll let you go first, Daniel. The first package, or I guess trade that you would like to make would be what?
For me, the number one is still Max Scherzer. To be able to add a guy of that caliber, like, just doesn't happen every day. And especially considering he's in the last year of his deal. Scott Boras has now come out and said that an extension is not necessary.
Okay.
It's something that to maybe discuss about, but it's not. We thought for a while it was like Max Scherzer's only accepting a trade if there's an extension involved. Well, that's not the case, which is a good thing. And I think just because he's in the last year of his deal, that kind of you're not giving up quite as much, especially for a player of Max Scherzer's quality. Like, obviously, you still got to give up something, but you're not giving up a package for prime Max Scherzer, who has 3 years left on his deal. Like, It's not going to be like that. I will say Jim Bowden's proposal. He had Diego Cartaya and Ryan Pepio for Max Scherzer. I think that's a bit much there, and it's not surprising coming from the source.
Yeah.
I don't think that's what it's going to take. I feel like whenever we see these deals, it's like it's a little underwhelming compared to what we thought it was going to be. So I don't think the Dodgers would have to give up both Cartaya and Pepio. Maybe one of those guys or one of the Dodgers' other like top 8 prospects or whatever.
Yeah.
Someone from that mix for sure. But I definitely don't think 2 of them. That just seems a little ridiculous for a 36, 37-year-old pitcher in the final year of his contract. But Max Scherzer is still number 1 for me. He's a game changer that you put at the top of your rotation. And you have to also consider, like, if you're adding a starting pitcher, like kind of like you mentioned earlier, that as far as the other guys that are in the rotation right now, those guys, or one of those guys, 2 of those guys end up in the bullpen.
Yeah.
So if you're adding a Max Scherzer and you're going into a postseason series with Walker Buehler, Clayton Kershaw, and Max Scherzer as your top 3 guys, then you have the option of using Julio in the bullpen. Price is back in the bullpen. Maybe Gonsolin's your 4th starter, or even if Julio's your 4th starter, he could still relieve in some other games. So you're getting reinforcements there as well, which is why I'm kind of more on this. I'm still on, let's add Max Scherzer above anyone else.
Yeah, and one other thing I should clarify, which Daniel's on board with, is these have to be like, who would you make a full price offer to? So it's not like, oh, I would rather have Max Scherzer than anybody else. Like, of course we would. It's who would you be willing to part with the pieces necessary? Here's my thing with Scherzer. And I've been trying to rationalize why I'm so hesitant to be willing to part with prospects in exchange for a guy like Scherzer, who's elite, slam dunk Hall of Famer, one of the best pitchers in baseball still, a guy who's pitched on the biggest stages and been successful, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm beginning to wonder if it's because of the standings as they sit. If the Dodgers were 5 games up in the division right now, I think I'd be way more interested in Scherzer. But the realistic possibility, and again, whether or not this is a 20% chance or a 40% chance of the Dodgers having to play in that wild card game scares me a little bit. Because, of course, on one hand, hey, you'd like to have Scherzer in that situation, or Buehler, or one of those guys pitching game 1. But the other piece is, like, the prospect of the Dodgers' entire season coming down to 1 game, knowing we already have a pitcher who's going to pitch in that game, which is Walker Buehler, it kind of freaks me out about sending 2 of our top 9 prospects. Because I'm with you. I think Cartaya and Pepio are probably 2 of the top 5 guys. And so I don't think the Dodgers include 2 of their top 5, although I do think it would have to be 2 of their top 9-ish. It seems steep for me. So I don't know if I'm crazy for letting the standings dictate that kind of thing. But as I'm going to talk through in some of my packages, I'm less interested in paying the top of the market, knowing that it's probably going to be a slight overpay because of the demand for a guy like Scherzer and because of how high-end he is. And just knowing that the potential risk involved of sending, 14 years of team-controlled, high-end prospect assets out. So am I crazy for thinking through that, Daniel, or do you think that should influence a little bit of how the Dodgers approach this?
I mean, I don't think you're crazy, and I definitely think those are all the options to weigh before making a deal. I will say though, like as far as the wild card game, I'm kind of on the opposite. Like I want as many guys possible. Like if we have to play in that game, I want to be able to put the best team out there to win that game. And let's say even if Scherzer isn't pitching that game, like let's say Buehler gets that game, which I think both of us would still say, like even if you have both guys, I think any one game scenario, I want Walker
Yeah.
Buehler on the mound. But then you have to consider if you do win that game, you're starting a postseason series right after that, and now Walker Buehler is not available till game 3 or 4. So I'd rather have Max Scherzer available for game 1 of that series, and then obviously for the rest of the postseason as well. But I guess I'm kind of on the opposite of you. I get what you're saying, but I'd rather just have as many guys as possible to go out and win that game. And yeah, it's a risk, but it's the one guy. Like I'm willing to take that risk for Max Scherzer just because it's Max Scherzer. Like yeah, I'm not doing it for some Joe Schmo rental like innings eater type guy. No, absolutely not. But just because it's Max Scherzer, like I'd be willing to take that risk.
Who do you, in your mind, is Cartaya below Keibert Ruiz, sort of in a value chart?
I mean, I don't see how you can't say yes right now, like the way Cabert's been mashing. And he's also obviously a lot closer to being major league ready. Like as high as people are on Cartaya, whether it be, Keith Law is, I'd say the highest on him having
safe to say.
Second. Yeah, he's still what, three at least years away. Like he's a 19-year-old kid playing an A ball right now. So, I think just because of the other catchers you have, with Smith and Ruiz, who weren't going anywhere for a long time, and both that's going to be the best catching duo in baseball right there for the next 3 to 4 years. I think that probably makes Cartaya a little more expendable just because he's still got that prospect glow or whatever, where it's like, yeah, you could get a lot for this guy, but he's not going to be in the majors for a while. So I think that's why I'd probably be open to willing to deal Cartaya. I will say it's not like I've seen the guy play a whole lot. Like I'm not Justin Lorber here that follows these guys on an everyday basis. So I'll defer to him on that. But I'd say, yeah, I'd rather keep Ruiz at this very moment.
So Cartaya and Michael Busch for Max Scherzer. You in or you out?
I think that's a little too much. I think I do Cartaya and one, like maybe a guy a little lower than Busch.
Yeah, see, and that's what it comes down to, right? Is what's the actual cost here? So, okay, we'll move on. My top package actually is a package, which I didn't necessarily tell Daniel it could be a package, but I'm going to mention a guy I think you're going to mention later. This is a trade with the Angels. If you watched our last show, you're not going to be surprised by this. But I'm wondering if the Dodgers could call up the Angels and make a move for Alex Cobb and Raisel Iglesias, the relief pitcher. So a starter and a reliever. Angels, 4th place in their division, 5.5 back in the wild card. They got 4 other teams on the outside looking in ahead of them. Cobb is sort of your cheap innings eater kind of guy, older guy. Has been good this year, though. A FIP of 2.66. The StatCast stuff is encouraging. So he is sort of your classic, hey, get a guy who you can pencil into the 4th or 5th, hopefully stay healthy the rest of the year. Iglesias, on the other hand, probably outside of Kimbrel, the best reliever that could potentially be available. The StatCast stuff is elite. Another back of the pen guy that you trust. Again, I don't think the cost is too high. He's making a good amount of money. He's a free agent at the end of the season. So Cobb and Iglesias for me would be a package I would call. I don't know if you could. I think this is a type of package where you're not dipping into one of those top 9 elite tier prospects. I don't know if you could get away with a package of like Andre Jackson and then maybe a Zach Rex, Luke Raley, DJ Peters type when you're talking about an Angels team that isn't trying to rebuild, because obviously they've got Ohtani for a couple years and they've got Trout. So they're going to need guys that can contribute quickly. So could you get away with Jackson and DJ Peters and Luke Raley for those 2 guys? If I could get a package like that, I'd be really interested in it.
Yeah. And Iglesias was the 3rd guy on my list. So I'm definitely with you there. And I think that would make some sense from the Angels perspective too. Cause like, if you look at Cobb individually and Iglesias individually, like I don't know if you're getting a whole lot for either of those guys. Like you mentioned, Cobb's been solid this year as an innings eater. Iglesias is one of the best after Kimbrel, maybe the best
Yeah.
reliever that's going to be available, but he's in the last year of his deal. So for rental relievers, you're typically not getting a top run 100 prospect back. Like you might get a solid, a good prospect, but you're not getting anything crazy. So maybe if you combine those two together, then you could get a better package. So I definitely think that's something the Dodgers should be interested in. Iglesias, he's been great. I mean, he's thrown 44.2 innings and he's got 67 strikeouts and 8
Yeah.
walks this year. So when you're looking for relief pitching, that's exactly what you're looking for right there. He's a free agent after this year, so like I just said, you're not giving up your top guys for him. So yeah, that's definitely a package I would be interested in because with the starting rotation options we have, we just went through it. It's not bad by
Yeah.
any means. Like we're pretty solid there. They could just use one guy to eat innings in case of injury. So I think Cobb would be that guy. Like I don't think even if they go get Cobb, I don't think he would be starting a postseason game unless I mean if he comes in and pitches really well. You know, maybe, but still you're still looking at when this team is healthy. Your top three is Walker Buehler, Clayton Kershaw, and Julio Urias, and then the fourth starter starts one game per series, so you could go Gonsolin or Price or Josiah Gray if he gets any better or continues to kind of progress. So yeah, I definitely would be open to that deal.
Yeah,
I'd say.
and part of it is when I'm thinking about the rotation, it's kind of the Scherzer thing. I kind of like where the playoff rotation is set, and obviously a lot of this is banking on health. But I like David Price as my fourth starter. This is a guy who's pitched on the biggest stage, and if they can get him stretched out and low innings, I like him. I'm high on Gonsolin, so I wouldn't hate if he was my fourth starter in a playoff situation. And so if you get a guy like Cobb, who basically becomes your third option at the game four starter, I like where I'm at. Let me throw my second one at you just because Iglesias, you mentioned, was on your list as number 3. This is where things get a little interesting. Yeah. And I'm going to throw Jose Ramirez's name out. And this isn't new to me. He's a guy that has sort of trickled into the conversation here as a guy who's got 2 years control left. I believe he's 27 years old, plays second base, plays third base. But there are rumors that the Indians would be willing to listen on him. And if I'm the Dodgers and Jose Ramirez is available, I'm interested. He plays second base. He plays third base. He could be your second baseman this year. He could be your third baseman next year. Justin Turner transitions into a designated hitter role. He adds some flexibility. This is a guy who I believe has been a top 3 MVP finisher 3 different times. So I like everything about this. And part of my thing is I think bats are going to be less in demand this offseason than starting pitching and relief pitching. And so if everybody is zigging, maybe you throw a zag and say, hey, we're just going to bulk up on offense and just go all in offensively and try and trust, the rotation in the pen as they are and go that way. So I like Ramirez. The cost would be expensive. Like if you're talking about Scherzer, this is probably an even higher cost package. I throw out maybe Keibert Ruiz, Cody Hosey, Michael Grove, and Kendall Williams. So kind of Ruiz is your top 100 guys, and then Hosey, Grove, and Williams are all kind of in that next tier of sort of not like straight up lottery tickets, but high end lottery tickets. I think Grove and Hosey, I believe, were either both first round picks or maybe one of them was a second round pick. Kendall Williams came over in the Ross Stripling trade. So Ramirez for me would be interesting. Another name that surfaced right before we started talking was Trey Turner, as a guy that Peter Gammons reports that the Nationals may not be interested in extending. He's got 1 more year left on his deal after this season. So same type of thing. I mean, both of those guys are elite players. The cost would be incredibly high, but there is a fit specifically with Ramirez at second base and third base, I think, for the Dodgers.
Yeah. I didn't include either of those guys on my list just because I'm still skeptical if they're even going to be traded or not. Like those guys are really high end players and those guys don't get dealt every day. But yeah, if those guys are available, I'd be all over both of them. Specifically Ramirez, like you said, he's still got 2 years of control, and it's very team friendly. It's like 12 or 14 million, like somewhere in that range for a player his quality. Like that's like nothing. So yeah, I definitely would be all over that. Like you said, he could play second, he could play third. He's a switch hitter, so you get him hitting from both sides, and you could just stick him right in the middle of your order, and that's a true game-changing bat right there. And Trey Turner's obviously the same, and he's got the speed to go along with it. So I definitely would be all over either of those guys. Like I know the Dodgers don't exactly have a need for a position player, but when you could get one of those guys, you do it and you figure out how it all works later. Like if I got Trey Turner on my roster, I'll figure out who's going to play shortstop and who's going to play wherever else. Cause at the end of the day, that's just a game-changing bat that you could add to your lineup. So yeah, I definitely would be all over those guys.
And what do you think about
It's
the
just,
package that I threw out? You and I are not.
I, I'd be, yeah, I think I'd be good with that package. Like, yeah, you're giving up Keibert Ruiz, who it would suck to see go, but you have Will Smith, and then in that scenario, you're keeping Diego Cartaya, so you have Will Smith as your guy for the next 3 or 4 years, and then next thing you know, Diego Cartaya is kicking on the door. So yeah, that's definitely a package I would be interested in. For Jose Ramirez, and I haven't looked at Trey Turner's contract situation just because that stuff came out right
Yeah.
before we started recording, but I feel like it would probably take a similar type of package to get him to, just because of how young and dynamic he is.
Yeah,
as
I
a
believe
player.
he's got one more year of arbitration, so it's one less year of team
Yeah.
control. Probably two guys that are, I would say, in the same tier of players out there. Turner obviously plays a different position than Ramirez does, but I would imagine those packages are not all that different, although with Ramirez having an extra year of control, that's a big one. So, okay, number 2 on your list, the number 2 package, a trade offer that you would be interested in making is what?
Yeah, the number 2 guy for me is Luis Castillo. He's another guy that not exactly sure if the Reds are going to move him, but he's been great over since the beginning of June. I mean, he started off the year slow, which is why if you look at his ERA, like right now it's in the 4s, which isn't great. But over his last 10 starts, he's got a 1.7 ERA. He's missing more bats. He's striking out more guys. He's young and controllable. He's another guy who you'd have for 2 more seasons beyond this year. So I think when you could just add a young player like that who's a top of the rotation type guy, it's another case of you just kind of can't pass up on that opportunity. And one thing that I haven't mentioned that I actually wanted to mention earlier when it comes to the starting rotation, like, yeah, even though we've went through the current Dodgers starters and it's not bad by any means, there's also some other factors to consider, and one is Julio's workload.
Yeah.
Like, that guy is on pace to go over 200 innings, and he's never been anywhere close to that. So if you bring in a guy like Scherzer or Castillo, then maybe you could consider moving Julio to the bullpen for a month just to kind of limit his innings. And then after that, you could decide if you want to build him back up to be a starter again, or if your starting rotation is looking good and he's dealing out of the bullpen, maybe you just leave him there, because at this current rate, if he's throwing 200 regular season innings and then 20 to 30 more in the postseason, you're looking at just a crazy workload that he's never even come close to. And obviously he's still really young. He's had his fair share of arm issues. So I think that's something to consider. Unfortunately, the Dodgers haven't had the luxury of being able to do that just because of how many injuries they've had in the rotation. But if you go out and get a guy like Scherzer or Castillo, then you could kind of start to consider it. And you also consider how much of a game changer that is for your bullpen. Like, we saw what he's capable of coming out of the bullpen in the postseason last year. Like, that kind of solves a lot of the back end issues, and you're not even going out and getting a reliever off the trade market. So I think that kind of kills 2 birds with 1 stone there. And that's, if you could get someone of Scherzer or Castillo's level, I think you have to consider
Castillo's a guy I'm really high on. I won't repeat myself from last week, but it just, you and I, it's a guy I really like. I would probably almost prefer Castillo to Scherzer, not because of who they are, but just because of the control and knowing that those 2 packages are probably similar. Castillo would probably be my number 1 trade target if that's the pond that the Dodgers wanted to go swimming in. Last one for me is Kenta Maeda. He's 3rd on my list. The Twins are 16 games under 500. Maeda, in the midst of the worst season of his career, not a ton of length he's offering right now. He's 33 years old. Does have 2 more years on that incredibly team-friendly contract. We talked about would he even be interested in coming back to the Dodgers. Obviously, he didn't seem thrilled about the way that his contract played out, maybe the way that the Dodgers manipulated some of that by putting him in the bullpen. The flip side is now he's in Minnesota. Maybe he's realizing the grass isn't always greener on the other side. I just like the familiarity with Maeda. I like that he could come in, he could be a starter. I like the versatility of a guy I know I can trust in the bullpen. And again, if he continues to pitch at the level he pitches at, then he doesn't even make the postseason roster. I don't know what the cost would be. That would be interesting. The contract, again, very team friendly. The flip side is he's 33 years old and in the midst of the worst season of his career. And so if that's the direction his career is headed, I don't think, this clearly would not be like a top 100 type prospect. I don't know if Andre Jackson level prospect is kind of where this deal gets done at, but he would be a guy that, you could throw in the rotation every once in a while for Julio. Then he could take Josiah Gray's spot once. Then he could take David Price's spot once. Like, you could just sort of let him roll things out throughout the rest of the season, giving guys a break along the way. But Maeda would be the last guy on this list of 3 that I would be interested in.
Yeah, and one thing I will say about Maeda is like at least we know the Twins are open
Yep.
for business. Like when it comes to these other teams and these other guys we talked about, like Jose Ramirez, Castillo, Scherzer, Trey Turner, whatever. Like we don't even know if those guys are going to be dealt or if they're even open to dealing them. Whereas with the Twins, like we've already seen, they traded away Nelson Cruz. They're shopping Jose Barrios, so we know at least if you want Maeda, like you could definitely probably get him at a reasonable cost, like you just said. So that's someone I'd be interested. We're obviously very familiar with Kenta Maeda over here, and kind of on that similar subject, we just saw unfortunately Rich Hill got dealt from the Rays to the Mets. I don't think there was a huge return there for the Mets, so I kind of wish the Dodgers would have gotten in on that. We could have taken Rich Hill as kind of in the innings eater type, kind of like in the same category as Alex Cobb, like you mentioned. That would have been fun, but I guess we'll have to watch him in New York. At least he's in the NL again, so he gets to hit. That'll
Yeah,
be
and
fun.
I mean, I wonder honestly if that says something about what the Dodgers are looking at, because when we talk about innings eater, yes, Rich Hill can make a start every 5 days, but it's probably going to be 4 innings, maybe 5. So maybe part of the reason they weren't interested there and would be interested in a guy like Cobb or whoever else is if they want someone that can give them 6 innings every once in a while. So we'll see what happens. Let's spend the last few minutes here talking about the Giants. The Dodgers, once again, on Tuesday, start a series with the Giants. 3 of 4 games in their last series decided in the 9th inning. The last time these 2 teams played, the Dodgers enter the series just 2 games back. It feels like the road team tends to have the advantage in this series for whatever reason. But we get Urias versus Webb, Buehler versus DeSclafani, and Price versus Cueto. Those are the 3 matchups. Let's start with Urias versus Webb on Tuesday. Obviously, last start, Urias dominant against the Giants, 7 innings, 3 hits, 5 strikeouts, just 1 earned run. Has faced them twice this season. His worst start of the year was May 29th, 5 innings, 11 hits, 7 runs against the Giants. Webb, on the other hand, 5 innings, 3 hits, 2 earned runs, 3 walks on Wednesday. He also shut them down in that game on May 29th. Urias versus Webb, that matchup has seemed to pop up a lot. The Giants are 9th in baseball in weighted runs created against lefties. The Dodgers are 2nd best in baseball against righties. They get all righties in this series. So Urias versus Webb, this feels like advantage Dodgers, I would imagine.
Yeah, I mean, the way Julio's been pitching over the last month or so, he could go up against just about anyone, and it's advantage Dodgers. But I will say, I'm expecting with this series, it's going to be a lot of the same. It's going to be close, tightly contested games, probably low scoring. Like both sides have really good pitching, and and it'll come down to if you could come back in the late innings or if you could hold them off from coming back in the late innings. And as we saw in this last series, the Dodgers were unable to do that, and that's why they lost 3 or 4. And it honestly could have been a sweep if they didn't come back and win the one game that they did. So, I'll be curious to see what the bullpen outlook is this week. I guess we're getting some guys that will be rested. Kenley didn't pitch yesterday or Friday, so he's coming in a little rested. Trinan doesn't throw more than 7 pitches an outing, so he's rested as well, which is good. Jimmy Nelson is back. He pitched, I think it was yesterday. He looked good too. That was great to see. Joe Kelly is another guy who he got the save yesterday, but he kind of got hurt, so we're gonna have to see with him. That'd be kind of a big loss. He's been throwing it really well, but yeah, I definitely think advantage Dodgers with Julio on the mound, but it should be a tightly contested game that could.
And I just got a notification. Max Muncy back from paternity leave just in time to face his favorite team, the Giants. So good news for the Dodgers there. On Wednesday,
could expect a couple splash hits now that he's got his dad's
totally.
strain.
Shout out to girl dads everywhere. Wednesday we've got Buehler versus DeSclafani. DeSclafani has faced the Dodgers 4 times this season. You could argue that 3 of his worst starts of the season were all against the Dodgers. Buehler has been dominant against the Giants, 4 starts against them, 27 innings pitched, just 3 earned runs, 17 hits, and 24 strikeouts. So obviously his last outing, dominant against them. This feels like on paper, pretty 2 evenly matched pitchers, but you've got one guy that does really well against the Giants and another guy who seems to do at least maybe closer to league average against the Dodgers. So again, it feels like on paper, advantage Dodgers.
Yeah. You just laid it out there. Like DeSclafani, he's having a great year. And I bet if you if you average out his numbers and take away his starts against the Dodgers, like
It's like
he'd
a
be
sub 2.
a Cy Young type of yeah, he'd be a Cy Young type of guy. That's how good of a year he's having. But like you said, the Dodgers have seen him pretty well, and Walker Buehler, I mean, that's Walker Buehler. So yeah, definitely advantage Dodgers.
Last one is a fun one. This one could have been pitched in 2013 back in their prime. David Price versus Johnny Cueto here. Neither guy has faced the other team as a starter. David Price has 2 appearances in relief against the Giants, and the numbers are really encouraging. 3 2/3, 1 hit, no walks, 6 strikeouts. So he's been good, but again, I mean, Cueto's up and down. Cueto feels like, as weird as it sounds, the guy I'm most nervous about. It just feels like he owns the Dodgers in all situations. He's got his herky-jerky stuff. He could be bad. It's the opposite of DeSclafani, right? DeSclafani's like, he's really good against everyone except for the Dodgers. Cueto feels like he's really bad against everybody except for the Dodgers. So Price versus Cueto, kind of a fun old guy matchup there.
Yeah. I feel like with Cueto, it's going to be one of two things. It's either going to be like 7 shutout innings, like 1 hit, just completely dominant, or like 6 runs in 3 innings. Like, I feel like it's not going to be an in-between with him. He's either going to dominate or get hit. I'm kind of with you. Like, I feel like I'm more nervous about him than anyone else that the Dodgers are going to see, just because he has had a lot of success against them. We know he does the whole wind up, herky jerky, like mixes up his shimmy that he'll mix in every now and then. You never know what you're going to get with him. So we'll see. Yeah, like you said, this is a matchup of the old guys here, 2 guys who've been doing this for a long time, and to their credit, they've both found ways to stay successful all these years.
Yeah, absolutely. And obviously, you look at Urias and Buehler and hope if you can get some length from them, then maybe the bullpen is pretty rested for that Price start, knowing that you may only get 4 to 5 innings from him, although he did get to 5 2/3 last time out. And then the good news, the best news for the Dodgers, we get the Diamondbacks, 3 games against the Diamondbacks after that. So, as always, we'll close the show with this, Daniel. As you look ahead, 6 games this week, what kind of performance do you need? We kind of usually set the bar at something like 2. So I'll go over. I'll ask you, more or less wins than 4 for the Dodgers this week.
It's hard to say because it's either I feel like they're either going to go 6-0 or like 2-4 or something. Ideally, when you look at this week, you see the Giants, who that's a tough series, 3 games, but you hope to take 2 out of 3 there. And then the Diamondbacks, I mean, I don't think you could hope for anything less than a sweep when it comes to the Diamondbacks. Like, at the end of the day, you'll take 2 out of 3, but I think you go into that series saying we should sweep these guys. So, 5 out of 6 sounds pretty nice to me.
I mean, it feels nice until you remember who the Dodgers are going to be starting offensively against these 3 games against the Giants. True. Obviously, having Muncy back is helpful, but man, there's some names in there that this could be a AAA roster that the Dodgers are trotting out sometimes, aside from like Will Smith, Justin Turner, and Chris Taylor, now Max Muncy. So obviously, no hope of Mookie Betts being back for this series, no hope of Corey Seager being back for this series, and so it's going to be more of the same. It's going to be more of the same. The Dodgers are going to need some performances from Zach McKinstry and Matt Beatty and guys, Albert Pujols, guys like that who are taking it back. So, 4-2 feels about right to me. I honestly wouldn't be surprised if the Dodgers unfortunately lost 2 out of 3 to the Giants and then swept the Diamondbacks. So that's kind of where I would land. I'm not hoping for that. I'm not rooting for that, but it's just what it feels like. Obviously, I hope I'm wrong. So anyways, that's enough. We got a busy week this week. Daniel and I are going to be back Wednesday night for a live post-game show. Justin Lorber and I are going to be recording Thursday. Next week, we got a bunch of people out of town. So unfortunately, post-trade deadline stuff is not going to be abundant here at Dodger Blue 1958, at least on the YouTube channel. DodgerBlue.com, Dodger Blue 1958 on social. We'll have you covered there. And then Daniel and I will be back in a couple of weeks for Dodger Heads, and we'll do a huge breakdown then. So stay tuned for that. But as always, we appreciate you joining. Please subscribe to the channel. Please ring the notification bell. And let your friends know. If you got Dodger fans that are in your life that are looking for people to talk Dodgers with, have them join us on Wednesday night. Have them check out our show on Mondays. We appreciate you. That's Daniel. I'm Jeff. We're here for Dodger Blue 1958, DodgerBlue.com. We'll see you soon.
The best team holding a trophy high in the air. The Los Angeles Dodgers, champions of the baseball world.